Hi, I just wanted to, before we pop in here, say that I filmed this video on July 5th and then proceeded to not ever finish this video because my life sort of went to hell in a handbasket. And so now I'm so sorry that this video is a little outdated, but I need to get it out to you all and I'll be back on track soon. I'm sorry for ghosting. I'm not dead. I was just ghosting. Okay, now the video. Welcome to Faith Evolving. My name is Mary Clare, and I did it. I found a way to talk about Stranger Things on my God YouTube channel. Big old spoilers for Stranger Things Season 4. If you haven't watched Stranger Things Season 4 and you want to, put this video in your watch later and then come back to it. Utilize those YouTube features. Now, before I go on and on about how much of a Stranger Things fan I am, I want to talk about the controversy. I feels more than controversy that Stranger Things has been in because of their production of season 4. There's a storyline that's supposed to take place in Russia, and they shot on location at a former Nazi prison labor camp in Lithuania. And a lot of people have spoken out about that and been like, hey, that's a little disrespectful. Not to mention that then also they're turning that location into a Stranger Things themed Airbnb. And that makes me want to bang my head against a wall several times, and it's awful. So we're gonna condemn that. Maybe don't do that, Stranger Things, Netflix. Maybe don't do that. So perk of waiting forever to post this video, apparently Netflix has nothing to do with the project and asked that the listing be taken down. Whoever owns the actual prison is still like wanting to turn it into a theme hotel, which is still fucked up. Also, I read something about possibly it being turned into a museum, which feels like, I don't know, the better option. So stay tuned on this. Not to mention that Stranger Things has kind of come under fire for anti-Semitism before, and I must admit I never made this connection. I don't know why. Now that people have said it, it seems obvious now, but with the numbers on Elle's wrist and the numbers that were forcibly tattooed on people who are imprisoned at Auschwitz, now just like random people are getting those number tattoos for Stranger Things, and then like Netflix reposts it on their Instagram story, and that just encourages it, and they don't like address it like, hey, that's kind of minimizing this like tragedy and genocide that happened. Maybe don't do that. So yeah, wanted to just mention those two things right out the gate. Now into the main event of this video. I've been just like trying desperately to find an excuse to talk about Stranger Things, and I realized I have one glaring me right in the face, and that is talking about the Satanic Panic in the 80s, especially how it manifests in season 4. So, if you don't know about Satanic Panic, here is a very brief rundown of it. For like centuries and centuries and centuries, people have accused things they don't like and othered people by calling them Satanists or saying they worship Satan. It's what fed a lot of different like witch hunts throughout history. Also, like infighting within Christianity. Like one group will be like, you're not a real Christian, you actually worship Satan. The other group's like, no, you worship Satan. I have experienced this firsthand. I have once had a commenter, very confusingly grammar-wise, accused me of my father being Satan. And I was like, my father's a middle school teacher. It's always kind of been in the zeitgeist of accusing people of being Satanists, whether they actually like were quote-unquote devil worshippers or like did occult practices or whatever or not. A lot of buzzwords. And then we get to the 60s and the 70s, and there's a rise in a coverage of serial killers. So this violence has captured the attention of the media and just everyday people, and they're like, oh, you can't trust anybody. So also in the 60s and 70s was the rise of actual Satanism. So there was Aleister Crowley, who sounds like a Harry Potter character, if I've ever heard one. He was British, and he was like very firm about it. He was like, I'm not a Satanist. I don't worship Satan. I don't believe in Satan. But he did use a lot of imagery from the Bible. So examples of this is like, you know, the number 666. He also talks about the whore of Babylon a lot. Also, I think this is kind of fun. He sent anti-Christmas cards to his friends. It's kind of funny. So there are other like smaller groups or whatever, but the big thing comes with Anton LaVey. He's the one who has the daughter that's a musician now, and a Buddhist, but she looks like Taylor Swift. Xena. At its core, what like Satanism is, if we're talking about like the Anton LaVey and similar types of Satanism, is basically just like a commentary protest against Christianity. They're like, okay, we're seeing all of the issues that Christianity is causing, so we're going to do the exact opposite and like make a whole bit out of it. And there are actual like real problems with Satanism, like within it, of like certain like misogyny and sorts of things, but not the problems that the media decided. Like it wasn't like really like made up of serial killers. It was just people that were like sex, drugs, rock and roll, or whatever. That was my like really bare bones description of what Satanism actually is, so that I can talk about the nitty gritty stuff. I can talk about the satanic panic of the 80s. So I'm gonna tighten my scrunchie and I'm gonna reach for my primary source. This is a real little leaflet situation that was published in 1988. There's a whole series of them, how to respond to blank. At my local theological library, people sometimes drop off books from their own collections that they don't want anymore. And if they're like vaguely about God, they're like, maybe this theological library will take it. So there are a bunch of these just sitting in the back of the library. And I asked the librarian, I was like, are you gonna like put these on display? Like, are these usable? And she's like, no. And I said, can I take them to use for a video? And she was like, yeah. So everyone say, thank you, Ellie. Thank you, Ellie, the librarian. And this book is a key example of how the satanic panic that was portrayed in season 4 of Stranger Things regarding D&D and Eddie Munson. Again, I said spoilers, so rest in peace, Eddie Munson. How all of that was not far off, because this book is... they talk about D&D in it. So the first episode of season 4 is called the Hellfire Club. And they had these fun little shirts. And basically what the Hellfire Club is like Hawkins High School's D&D club. D&D stands for Dungeons and Dragons, which is a popular tabletop RPG, so tabletop role-playing game. And if you're a longtime watcher of Stranger Things, you'll know D&D has been a part of the show since the first episode. They're playing D&D before Will vanishes. They often name the different monsters off of D&D characters that they resemble. They do this with the Demogorgon. They do it with Vecna. D&D is baked into the show. So it was kind of bound to happen that they would finally talk about the satanic panic that is involved with D&D. One of the first scenes that we see with the Hellfire Club is of Eddie Munson, this guy that like listens to heavy metal. He does not come from money. He academically struggles. He's an outcast. Everyone calls him Eddie the Freak. But he's like the head of the Hellfire Club, and he's the DM, dungeon master, the guy that, creates the story and facilitates the story in the group storytelling that is D&D. And he's reading from this newspaper talking about how, D&D's sweeping the nation.
Dungeons and Dragons. At first regarded as a harmless game of make-believe, now has both parents and psychologists concerned. Studies have linked violent behavior to the game, saying it promotes satanic worship, ritual sacrifice, sodomy, suicide, and even murder.
And he laughs at it, and then that becomes his life. At the end of this episode, Eddie's kind of in wrong place, wrong time, and the cheerleader, Chrissy, who is not waking up, is killed by a supernatural force from the Upside Down that is then named Vecna. And she is also the girlfriend of Jason, the town wannabe hero who is the captain of the basketball team and helped him win the award. I play D&D and I don't play sports, if you cannot tell. Then everyone's like, she was found by Eddie Munson's trailer. Eddie the Freak. Eddie who likes Metallica. Eddie who plays this evil, stinky little game called D&D with the Hellfire Club. The Hellfire Club's like the ones in, 18th century England with all the aristocrats. Or they're notorious, like, ne'er-do-wells who joked about worshiping Satan for shits and gigs. That Hellfire Club? Well, that Hellfire Club is the reason why they're dying. Eddie Munson's actually a serial killer. And it's like, no, dude. He's just a really good DM. So, Eddie Munson was based off of a real-life kid. A couple of them, amalgamation. There's this, teen college-age student whose name was James Dallas Egbert III. And he played D&D, and he also had, various, mental health things going on. And he, went down into, the basement of somewhere. People were thinking, maybe to play D&D, and he went missing for 2 months, but then they found him. And, but a year later, he ended up completing suicide. Then a couple of years later, in 1982, another kid, this time a high schooler, completed suicide. And he played D&D, and his mother blamed it on the D&D and said that that's what caused him to pass away. And so she created honestly, probably in an act of grief to try to find a reason and to cope with, the loss of a child, which is a terrible thing to have happen to anybody. And the whole thing was to try to, get rid of Dungeons and Dragons because people thought it was a danger to society. When later, psychologists did, their psychologist-y thing, and actually D&D helps people to keep staying alive, which makes sense because it's a community and it's spending time with your friends. There's actually a whole episode of Community which was taken down off of streaming platforms because a character's just wearing blackface in it. But other than that part of the episode, which is still substantial, it does a really good job of showing how D&D can actually be this really powerful, good bonding experience between people. But in the 80s, that was not the case. People thought it was a pipeline to full-blown Satanism. It just so happens that there are also people who committed crimes that played D&D, but this was in the minority of people that played D&D. Generally, it's the same as it is now, just a bunch of nerds hanging out with their friends. But there's the example of Sean Sellers, who killed his parents at a convenience store clerk. And, he had a book where he, was talking about Satan, and he played Dungeons and Dragons. But there are also people who were wrongly convicted of crimes because they played Dungeons and Dragons. And this is where we see that happen to Eddie Munson in the fictional world of Stranger Things. He's in the wrong place at the wrong time, and because he's an oddball and an easy target, everyone just assumes that he did it when there's actually, a paranormal force in this realm that people don't know about. And so he's forced to go on the run as there is a witch hunt out for him, led by this grieving high school player whose anger and frustration is misplaced at this innocent person who just so happens to be othered. And this is where I talk more about Jason. Jason, character's name is like Jason Carvey, I think. And he is like the embodiment of Christian white supremacy. And he thinks that he's doing the right thing. Firmly at his core, he drums up this vigilante justice with all of his friends. Another one of his friends gets claimed by Vecna and is killed. It just drives him further and further, convinced that it's Eddie pulling some sort of Satanist magic. And he goes to the town hall and he drums up everybody and he quotes Romans.
Then I remembered Romans 12:21. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And God knows there's good in this town. So much good. It's in this room. It's in this room. Right here. Right now. So I came here today, humbly, to ask for your help. To join me in this fight. Let us cast out this evil and save Hawkins. Together.
He sounds like a preacher. And it's terrifying. Now, I do want to mention, real quick, I have to. So, the verses, remember, he's doing this to try to drum up everybody to go after Eddie and the rest of the Hellfire Club, which, again, are just a bunch of little nerds playing basically a board game. And so there's, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. But directly preceding that, we have, do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. And he kind of ignores that part because then we find him red in the eyes, deeply unwell, buying guns, ready to enact vigilante justice on the town. And it's this case example of Christianity, especially of the white supremacist kind, seeing a problem in society and then missing the point, missing what the root cause is, deciding something else is the cause, and then just going after it and destroying something that's other but generally harmless. It's just people living their lives. And it's kind of heartbreaking to see, and I didn't like it. And Stranger Things even shows, news broadcasts about people talking about, satanic panic and those sorts of things.
Claiming the Munson murders opened a doorway between worlds. A doorway, they say, into hell itself.
Are you hearing this? They're now calling it a doorway into hell.
Great. More hysteria. Just what we need.
It's the news.
And that was, real. There was a 1985 broadcast on ABC's 2020, wildly speculating about the links of Satanism with certain violence that was happening across the country. And they talked to this, Christian influencer at the time, but before there was, widespread internet. He was, a Christian comedian. And he said that he was involved in Satanism, and then, converted to Christianity and got out of it. When actually he never was. People proved that it was wrong through, a bunch of means. He said he had, long hair, these, fingernails, and people found pictures of him at the time period of the 1960s, and he just looked like a guy. Also, he was involved in Campus Crusade for Christ crew. like in college. Like the guy was always a Christian and just wanted his like fame. There was also linked to this Michelle Remembers, which is another like almost immediately debunked book about Satanism. And even though it was almost immediately debunked, it like took hold. It's kind of like that documentary Plandemic where it was released and then real quickly people were like, that's bullshit, but the damage was already done. And now people like firmly believe that COVID-19 was like government warfare to like control our brains or something. It's really similar vibes. Satanic Panic has not gone away. It's just morphed into QAnon. And like QAnon, Satanic Panic, often the further down you dig, it gets racist and like anti-Semitic. Which brings me to what I think is the most like interesting but like uncomfortable scene of Jason's, which is when they confront Erica and Lucas. One chases Erica, 11, 12-year-old kid, and like tackles her. And Jason takes a gun and points it at Lucas and has him take everything out of his pockets and put his hands in the air. And it is not lost on me, and I think probably not most viewers, that Erica and Lucas are Black and the vigilante justice people are white, and they like kind of just brush past it. And so I'm like, I don't know if this was like an intentional commentary or it's just there. So I looked up to see if other people were talking about it. Okay, so alarmingly, it was really hard to find people analyzing this online. There really weren't a lot of like YouTube videos at all in a quick search. So I went to TikTok, and just the nature of TikTok as a platform makes it really hard to search for like a very nuanced topic. I saw some people discussing it, but in a very TikTok manner where it's really hard to like just like pull the clip out to show you without explaining the style of the video going on. However, I did find this really interesting article on Teen Vogue by Caitlin McNabb, and I'm going to read to you all just a couple of excerpts. As the scene continues, it's intercut with updates on what the other characters are up to. It's only Lucas and Erica who face conflict in the real world. Every other character is given an otherworldly, supernatural creature to slay. It's only Lucas and Erica who must fight a monster that they would face on any other day as young Black kids in suburban, small-town Indiana in the 1980s. This season, despite Eddie Munson being the target that Jason, Andy, and their mob are truly after, the season's secondary villains never actually go head-to-head with Eddie. Instead, they take all their rage out on the Sinclair siblings in Season 4's finale. This is not Lucas and Erica's Eddie Munson moment. They are not heroes. This is not comeuppance or righteousness or victory. This is the worst nightmare of many Black kids across America. And Jason being killed by Vecna's earthquake is not satisfying. It's a cop-out that allows the writers to avoid making the golden white boy face repercussions for inciting rage and fear within his town. The Duffer Brothers, the creators of the show, continuously betray their Black characters, and this latest disappointing betrayal of the Sinclair siblings confirms the glaring issue of an uneven and oftentimes tone-deaf depiction of race in the series. If you want to learn more about the issue of racism in Stranger Things, I highly suggest the video essay Stranger Things Can't Write Black People and It's an Issue by the Black Cinephile. It was created before Season 4 came out, but I mean, the issues aren't new to Season 4. So, yeah. Like, he, like, brutalizes Lucas. So that was like, yeah, nah, Jason is the embodiment of, like, Christian white supremacy. But then he, like, dies, and you miss it. You miss it when he dies because you're too busy watching, like, Hawkins split like a compass. And then you realize, like, oh, they split Jason down the middle. And then Eddie dies a hero's death and is never redeemed outside the Upside Down. And it's sad. and it feels really real, even though it's horror. And that's the thing about horror as a genre. I don't really like horror because, like, at my core, I'm a coward. But what I do know of horror from studying it and having a professor that was obsessed with, like, every horror film that ever existed is that what horror does is it takes things in the public conscious that people are scared of or worried about, and they heighten it and they fantasticize it. That's a word now. And they make you watch your worst fears. They craft stories around, you know, being alone in the woods, or it being dark at night, or if you're Jordan Peele, like the very real horrors of racism, you're kind of like forced to look into an ugly mirror. And Stranger Things season 4 like really did that for me, because of the Satanic Panic and the calls to Christianity. Also, in that the character of Vecna preys off of people's guilt and shame, when a lot of times the church can prey off of people's guilt and shame. I just found it really interesting. Stranger Things has always felt like very American to me. I think maybe it's just because it's like set in small town Indiana, and maybe because Nancy had a fucking sawed-off shotgun this season. But season 4 also like felt like distinctly Christian to me. In not a good way. Not a good way. So, yes, so thank you all for watching. If you want to learn more about Satanism, don't look at this little leaflet thing. There's a lot of, like, wild stuff in here. And it's all, like, wrong. It's all just, like, inaccurate. So if you want to learn more about Satanism, don't go to this How to Respond To pamphlet. Go to Jen's videos. This is the point in the show where I give a major stinky actually, it's gonna be a stinky little shout out to my patron saints of Faith Evolving. Also, want to highlight, I got Ko-fi, I got merch. Okay, bye.